love. And it's very hard in life to find a job where you really love it. But most archaeologists, many of them would even do it for free if they weren't getting paid for it. Okay? And so, when you get to universities, you'll get something like the example of Sir Mortimer Wheeler thrown in a text. And you'll sit there and you'll say to yourself, well, that's what he said. I'll probably never have to see his name again or ever worry about him, so I'm not even going to look up anything about Sir Mortimer Wheeler because he's an old fart of an ancient archaeologist and he's not going to come back to bite me in some exam. Well, there's your mistake. If you're good at what you're doing, I mean, good, you look up Sir Mortimer Wheeler to find out what else he did. If he is brought forward as a quotation in a book to illustrate something, if it ever comes down to a discussion with your professor and you know more about him than any other student in the class, that professor is going to be smitten. Absolutely. To find students that actually bother to look up people that show up in their book in another context. So I'm going to reward you with a question on the exam. You're going to look up Sir Mortimer Wheeler, which shouldn't be difficult for most of you, because you're cyber people already. And you are going to find the name of a site, that's an archaeology site, that is not a computer site. Okay? A site would be the name of a place that he excavated or dug. It turns out that Sir Mortimer Wheeler is famous for systemizing the procedure for doing archaeology, for making it possible to collect data in a regimented way. Not exciting stuff, I realize, not Indiana Jones, who was a classical archaeologist. But that's what he's famous for. And when I asked students to look up a site, I found that I had to start demanding one site in particular that would stand out. Because this fellow has dug in several places. Okay, so the site I want you to name, it's a two-word name. So your answer should be 2 words. The second word sounds like, no, the second word is a medieval building with a moat. And where knights, that's spelled with a K, go to sleep at night. Okay? And it's also named after a hero in a CTV detective series. What's the last name? Something medieval building with a moat where knights go to sleep.
Castle.
Castle.
Oh, Rick.
There you go. What a brilliant you are, eh? Good thing I didn't go into my sound click and do my charades thing. Okay, so the first word is something else, it's a blank. The second word is castle. You look it up, you find the name of the site, something castle, you get a mark. Don't look at it. Is it worth a mark in your life to look something up? Is it too easy? Now, historical archaeology, the example is on colonial North America. And the interesting thing about that, everybody who thinks of the Carolinas thinks of tobacco or cotton. This is what the American slaves, the African slaves, are known to have produced. And these were certainly the 2 big products that were involved in the American Civil War and the war to free the slaves. However, what people don't know is that colonialism existed under the British long before the Americans got freed in the late 1700s, 1776 in the American Revolution. And so in that area, there weren't states. There wasn't a North Carolina or a South Carolina. Okay? There wasn't even a Duke basketball team. By the way, all those universities are based on tobacco money. Duke, big heiress to the tobacco fortune. North Carolina, huge amount of, no wonder they had big basketball teams, okay? But in the time when there was no South Carolina State, no North Carolina State, there were only the Carolinas, which was a colony of Great Britain. And what most people don't know is that they didn't produce any of the things we think of in the South, because by a weird piece of chance, the English plantation owners received huge numbers of the best rice-growing peoples in Africa. Now, I don't even think of rice in Africa, but apparently it was under big production under these people. And so in the early years, the Carolinas were producing rice of incredible quality and incredibly efficiently, because the people that were their slaves were so good at it, and they made huge profits for the plantation owners. Something in colonial history I'd never heard of before, the discussion of historical archaeology. And the reason we know this is because instead of just doing the plantation house, where most people do their archaeology, the big house on the hill, they started doing historical archaeology at the place that the slaves lived. And they begin to understand, from finding the things that the slaves made and they had with them, that these were from a certain part of Africa where rice growing was absolutely superb, okay? And so we wouldn't have known that without historical archaeology. And so sometimes there's a question or an ABC on that. What is CRM? Okay? And CRM is Cultural Resource Management. But when you're making up an exam, when you get initials for something, it makes the perfect question on an exam, because you can put anything down to try to fool a student. So you better know what CRM is, because an A, B, or C could be CRM, and putting down something that just has the same, would be those three letters. So you better know what CRM is. It's Cultural Resource Management. And I did an archaeology summer, 2 summers, archaeology, salvage archaeology, which was part of that. How to manage resources. And salvage archaeology is one of the things that you do in that field. You go in and you dig before somebody destroys the site to build a building, to build a bridge, to flood a valley, all the things that are necessary in the expansion of a city or things like that. And they're going to start destroying sites where there's evidence of earlier occupation. Well, you can stop them in Canada. The laws allow you to stop them until they search the site. And a lot of people don't know that either. If you want to stop a big building from being built, find an archaeology site under it, and they'll probably pay you to dig it, because they want to put something else up on it. Okay? So CRM has been on, and make sure you know what the initials mean, and make sure you know salvage archaeology is an example of something done under that. Now, there are 2 types of archaeology discussed: experimental archaeology and ethnoarchaeology. When there are 2 things that are both of the same thing, they give a definition of each and they give an example of each. It is very easy for me to put together a multiple choice question with that as the answer. And when I have 2 classes, I can actually make the answer different for 2 classes on the same question. So I force students to answer the same question in 2 different classes, which I love, because that's a comparison, okay, which class is doing well, which class isn't, but the answer is not the same answer. So know what experimental archaeology is, know what ethnoarchaeology is, know what the example is, because the question usually is, It'll describe an example or it'll give a definition, and the three possibilities are experimental archaeology, ethnoarchaeology, or some other archaeology I made up. Okay? So, you should know those two. What is applied archaeology? Okay, the next one, 44. Now, page 7 to page 10. The reason you're likely to get one question and maybe even two questions on this example is because it's a very innovative example of archaeology. It's so innovative that National Geographic, the magazine, did a 5 to 6 page glossy with beautiful pictures of garbage coverage of this particular archaeological dig. So, applied archaeology is where you take the skills of archaeology to do something practical, okay? And what the University of Arizona did under William Raffjay, his name is at the bottom, and he is in front of a back end of a garbage truck at the bottom of the page, okay, is they launched something that nowadays we see as obvious but nobody thought about before. What is archaeology but prehistoric garbage picking? So he probably had a bunch of students, did I tell you this one yet?
No.
A bunch of students who were undergrads. And in the neighborhood, there's all these beautiful archaeological places to dig amongst southwestern early peoples, the Anasazi, all these peoples in the area. But do you think he's going to take a bunch of rookie undergraduate students out and destroy a site so they can get the experience? No way, okay? So what he did is, he goes to the Tucson dump and he gives them the assignment to do an archaeology dig in the Tucson garbage dump. Okay? And of course, by the way, you better learn how to spell Tucson. The C and the S get confused by students. And so, they do an analysis of the garbage dump to see what people are consuming. And so this is applied archaeology, historical archaeology, because it's done on a present period, when there's writing, and also it's behavioral archaeology. It's got about everything you'd want to do in archaeology, because it tells you the consumption patterns of people who send their garbage to the dump. And then, just to be a real pain in the ass, they do a sociological survey where people go around and ask all these people, what do they consume? And of course, they find that the survey is what people tell you. What they dig up in the dump is what they actually consume. And of course, all the things that are fattening, bad for you, alcoholic, and politically incorrect, they don't really eat those, or much of them. And of course, the dump shows that indeed they do. Huge quantities of all those things that they say they're not eating. So much for sociological surveys. Ask people what they're doing, and you'll only get what they want you to know about them. They're not going to paint a bad picture of themselves by telling you what they actually are consuming. And so this is a rather famous archaeological dig. There'll be at least one question on it, maybe two, depending on which class you are. So all I would do is memorize every fact in the example, which is not very difficult, actually. We're digging in garbage, and and as a result, it became popularly known as a garbology project. Okay? And so if you may pick up a National Geographic magazine one day and see glossy pictures, that beautiful photography of a garbage dump and all they dug up. I don't know if anybody's done that in Canada yet. I'm sure they'll do it eventually. Because nobody's gonna protest if you send rookie students in to dig up a garbage dump. If you send them in to dig up a valuable site, they might say, wait a minute, they need more experience. You should know what middens are. That means garbage heap. Where I did my archaeology, the garbage heaps were filled with the shells from clams and barnacles and seashell creatures and salmon vertebrae. Other places the garbage would be filled with other things. And also you should know 49 what happened in the interviews. Okay, so let's turn
Sorry.
now to, yes, go ahead.
Can you go over the answer for 49? Like, where is it in the test?
Okay. How did interviews compare to what was actually found? Well,
Oh, never mind. You
yeah,
just said that.
they found all kinds of things, lots of booze, a lot of empty bottles. They found packages for Twinkies instead of health food. They, everything that these people were not supposed to consume, or they said they didn't consume, in the survey, they consumed a lot of it. And so, there are now laws protecting garbage, eh? In some places, you can't go through a person's garbage. Companies are very conscious of people going through their, corporations going through their garbage. And that's why we got into shredding. Because ideas and information was stolen from the garbage. And in some places, you can be fined for going through other people's garbage. But if you're an investigative reporter and you're not willing to get up to your neck in a dumpster, you're not a very good investigative reporter. Okay? Now, let's see your answers from, let's see, question 50 to question 105. Show me what you got. Question 50. Okay. Got the rest. Question 50 on. You done? You done? You done? You done? 50 to 60. Anything you didn't get? 60 to 70. Anything you didn't get? 6?
76.
76. Why do we study these other primates? Okay, 76. At the bottom of, I've got page 9. You got other people got page 9? Okay. We share many biological features with this group of animals, and data about their adaptations aid us in understanding Homo sapiens. The birth of primatology was created, the study of other primates than humans. You are all primates. It was started by a man by the name of Louis Leakey. Louis Leakey, at Olduvai Gorge with his wife, had discovered early Olduvai Gorge, had discovered the earliest hominids yet discovered in 1959. So, National Geographic ran to him and got him under contract for every film he'd make. And they gave him lots of money to give to researchers, other paleoanthropologists. And so he decided, when he looked at the fossils he was digging up, that they didn't look like modern humans. They walked on two legs, but their faces were very ape-like. So he realized that if he sent people out to study chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans, modern apes, not ancestors to us, modern apes, that we might learn something of the behavior of our ancestors by looking at the modern apes. And so he invented the field of primatology. And he sent out the famous ones Goodall and Diane Fossey. Goodall studied chimpanzees, Jane Goodall, and Diane Fossey got killed while she was studying gorillas in the mist. The poachers killed her. Okay. And so, the reason they were studying them to see if in ape culture, the great apes, we could get some kind of understanding of the material remains we were finding in early hominids. There is no one-to-one correspondence between ape behavior and ours, although there are some features that continue on from our ape ancestors. Okay? There are some things we still continue to do. If you have an urge to pull down your pants in public and moon people, that's very primate-like. Absolutely primate-like. There's a group of tarsiers. They will yell at you, they will spit at you if you get into their territory. And then they will display their genitalia to you. Because that's the last resort. When they get really upset, they start, showing their parts to the other group. And so if you have this urge, what some people do, to walk around in overcoats and reveal yourself, or particularly stick your window out of a car in Fort Lauderdale, apparently that's the place to do it, it's very primate, okay? You're getting very basic. Now, also, I told you the example when these kids, elementary school, they're at the elementary school, the 12-year-old girls who are 10 years older than the 12-year-old boys, right? They're 10 years older. They should be going out with the 15-year-olds. Have to get these boys into shape for the dance, the graduation dance, which is a beach theme. Whoa! And look what they got to work with. And the boys, the girls are all around the bottom of the tree trying to pick out something off the tree. And the boys have all climbed the tree and hanging from the tree. I thought, God, what primates! The boys are so frightened they climb the bloody tree, So it was really quite interesting. Okay, now. Okay, 76 to 90, anything? And 91 to 105. Yes?
Can we go over 99 to 102?
102. Okay, we'll get to those at the end of what I'm going to do right now, okay? Just remind me when we get to the end, because I want to cover it all. Okay, you should know about linguistics. You should know what number 54, what is descriptive linguistics? It's about the mechanics of linguistics. How sentences work, how they work in different languages, how there'll be different references of feminine form and male form. Tells you a lot about the culture and the evolution of the culture. And historical linguistics, which tells you how the language developed, what other languages it's related to. You remember when we looked at the example of the Apache and the Navajo, that it was determined that neither the Navajo or the Apache could be the descendants of the Anasazi because their nearest language relatives were in the northern part of Canada, not in the American Southwest. And so they must have moved down into the area relatively recently. And the fact that the Navajo called the Anasazi ancient enemy peoples doesn't seem to say anything about them being their relatives. You don't call people ancient enemy peoples when they're your relatives. Okay? Now, sociolinguistics and ethnolinguistics. The same with ethnoarchaeology and experimental archaeology. The same type of question. Know what these are. Know what sociolinguistics and, that's number 60, and know what ethnolinguistics are. You probably have a question where you get one of them that you have to identify by an example or the definition. So know what those two are. I'm pretty sure I've got a question of each of those on each of the exams. Okay? So, now, you should know what biological anthropology is, but you won't get a question on it. You should know what it's called also, but you won't get a question on it. You should know the three major areas of focus in biological anthropology, because when there's three areas of focus, it's a possibility for a multiple choice exam. That's number 65. Now, you should know paleoanthropology, what it means. Okay? And you should know that it studies, okay, this is from 66 to 73. You should know that it studies hominids, which I already gave you in lectures. And hominids are defined as habitual bipedal creatures. They walk on two legs. Your ancestors first became hominids and were no longer apes when they habitually walked on two legs and no longer were quadrupeds. This means that when you look for evidence of the first hominids, when we separated from apes, you'll be looking for knee joints, leg joints, feet that are bipedal. Okay? And on this, this sheet, you have what is now considered the earliest hominid in this corner here, called Ardi. Ardi is 4.4 million years old. Ardi is one of 5 hominids that are possibly the earliest. But this is the only one which everybody agrees on. She has a much longer name. Actually, I don't know why I'm using she. I don't think she's a she at all. Male. Okay? Ardipithecus ramidus is the name. Don't worry about it. We're not at that section yet. But when the Americans got involved and found Lucy, forever after, each hominid got a nickname. So Lucy got a nickname. Ardi is Ardipithecus, got a nickname. I don't know what the next one's going to be. But it's easier than saying Ardipithecus ramidus every time when you mention him. You will notice that this is not a very human-looking creature, Ardi. Our ancestors looked a lot like apes, except apes were not habitually bipedal. But this is an ape that's very interesting. Its feet grip. It has what we call prehensile ability in its feet. The ability to grip, prehensile. Okay? And that indicates it was still living in the trees when it began to walk upright. And we think that our ancestors first walked upright while they were still living in the trees. And so Ardi's a good example of it. Does not have a foot that's fully adapted to the ground, but is walking upright. Okay. Now, primatology. You will turn to the page with the definitions of primatology, which are page 9. And I'll show you a huge, huge mistake that the book makes. Look at, in the little squares that are on the right-hand side going up the page, the definition of primatology, the study of non-human primates. This is correct. The reason that it has an odd definition and excludes us is not because we're not primates, but at the time primatology studies began, there was already the study of human beings called anthropology. So when Goodall and Fossey and another one began to study apes and other primates, they only made the definition the study of non-human primates. It's more of a historical reason than a reason that makes sense. If I was to ask you, what is the definition of primatology, you would automatically say to me, the study of primates. And that's not the definition. It's the study of non-human primates. Because there already was a study of anthropology before it. So, look where it says primatology in the book, in the writing to the left. Primatology is the study of our nearest animal relatives, the primates. That is totally wrong. It gives a correct definition up here on the side, and then it writes down this: the study of our nearest animal relatives, the primates. Well, our nearest animal relatives are not all the primates. We are primates. So you have to put the non-human primates right beside it. Right in this spot here. If it doesn't go in here, it's wrong. There's only one place you can put it, and that's a question on the exam. You have to put in non-human, you have to fix the sentence so it's correct, and you have to put in here, the non-human primates. Okay? And if you don't put it there, you don't understand the answer. Okay. Any questions on that? That's another question on the exam I gave you. Okay. Are chimpanzees our ancestors? No. They are modern apes, gorillas, orangutans, all the other apes are not our ancestors. They all descended, like ourselves, from ancestors that were related to each other. We once shared an ancestor with each one of them. The gorillas broke off first from our common ancestor. Then the chimpanzees, then the bonobos, the midget chimps. Our closest ancestor is the chimpanzee. We broke off from a common ancestor with them. Okay, we shared a common ancestor. We can trace ourselves, both of us, back to a common ancestor 5 to 8 million years ago. That's why we are 98 to 99% genetically identical to chimpanzees for sure, a less extent to bonobos, and a slightly less extent to gorillas, and a much less extent to orangutans. Okay, yes?
So you're saying that the chimpanzees are not our ancestors?
They're not our ancestors. They are cousins, actually. We are related them because we share a common ancestor that was an ape. They evolved themselves from, they probably don't look exactly like the common ancestor, as do we. Okay? We don't look like the ape that we used to look like way back when. Okay, 83 forensic anthropologists. You should know something about forensic anthropology, that it began in universities and then became parts of every TV show, cop station. It was usually the archaeologists and the people working at the universities that were looking at bodies that were decomposed and parts of bodies. And when it became necessary for police departments to figure these things out, they were the first experts they went to. And over time, these universities began to train experts in forensics that form parts of police departments. But don't believe that every police department has a forensic science thing like Miami mice or Las Vegas or Quantico, the FBI. Most of that stuff has to be sent out somewhere else to be processed. It's very expensive to run that kind of operation. And if any of you had watched the O.J. Simpson trial, the first thing they picked apart, that his defense lawyers picked apart, was how badly the forensics were done by the police. People stepped in places where they shouldn't have, they contaminated the site, they lost evidence, they misidentified evidence. So this myth of the terrific CSI that finds everything out is really a myth. Okay, they have the tools, but unfortunately, very seldom do they bring all the tools to bear in one case. Okay? And very often they have to send them off somewhere and wait for the results from some bigger lab. As I said, one of my students is at Vanderbilt doing a degree leading to forensic anthropology. And she had to pick up a whole bunch of biology courses before she could do that. Let's see. Also, it's important that forensic anthropology itself is concerned with legal issues. Because, of course, it is producing evidence, in many cases, for trials. Time of death, gender, what killed the person, was there an implication of somebody else who left evidence of themselves on the scene, all those things. And so legal concerns are very important in real forensic science associated with police departments. Archaeological forensic anthropology, you know, there aren't many things that we worry about legally. We're just trying to find out, you know, what killed the thing, what gender it was it healthy, what group it was in, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now you should know 88 what holistic means, because it's one of the attributes of anthropology. And remember, never spell it with a W. If you see it in an A, B, or C with a W, it's a sucker play to get you to go for it because it looks like the right answer. Holistic in anthropology, maybe it should have a W in front of it, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's see, anything else there that's important? The fact that anthropologists do comparative studies. Oh, one thing, 97, contemporary human variation studies. You should know what that is, because it only mentions it once in the book. It's actually the study of physical traits and genetics that vary between human populations. We are all modern human beings, but we have different mixes of genetic traits and physical traits over the world, as you can imagine. And you can trace contact between peoples and all kinds of things with that possibility of knowing where these traits originally came from, where do you find them in numbers, and so on and so forth. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to look at your sheets for the next one. We'll just go on to the next one.
So 99 to 102 is my perfect. I didn't find the answer.
Now, what is it you wanted to know?
For 99 to 102, but you didn't cover any of those questions. So.
Okay, 99, 20, 102?
Yeah.
Anthropology as a whole, it's at the top of page 11. Anthropology is a holistic study of all cultural and biological aspects of human species. Okay? Holistic means it takes in all the aspects of the study. If you were doing an economic study of something, you would concentrate on the economics of the situation. If you're doing an anthropological study, you count on historical, economic, political, linguistic, everything. Because anthropologists want to figure out the whole picture before they make judgments about what causes the behavior involved. As I pointed out to you several times, we think that a certain event, because it states it is doing something, doesn't do several things at the same time. And I told you about registration, why at the end of a registration in a big hall, where everybody claimed that they had to wait around, people didn't leave. And why they didn't leave is because there were a lot of cute other people of whatever gender they were interested in still there. And so the function was on one level to get courses. The function on the level of social was to meet other people in a large setting, all in one place. And even if you took classes at Dawson, you wouldn't see those people from 1 month to the next, but at one moment they're all in the same room. And everybody's looking at everybody. And I always thought that Dawson missed the point when it went to computers. They didn't realize why registration was that popular. Okay? It was you couldn't throw people out. You got your courses, leave. Oh well, I'm waiting for a friend. Oh yeah, sure, okay. What was the other number?
100 to 102, but I think they're all in that paragraph.
They're all in that paragraph? Okay, yeah, they are. The paragraph at the top, yeah. All right. Now.
Yes.
Okay. This is the last sheet, 106 on. Okay, 112. Goodall and Fossey did what field work where? Goodall studied the chimpanzees in Africa. Chimpanzees are native to Africa. They don't find them anywhere else except in zoos. And personal pets, which is really stupid to do. Take animals like that. We had that woman whose face was chewed off by a chimp in Florida because somebody got too close to her friend. And the chimp got excited. By the way, they only use young chimps in movies. They don't use adult chimps because adult chimps are too dangerous. They're as strong as 2 or 3 men. And if they get some thought in their head, you can't stop them. So there's this incredible myth from movies that chimpanzees are these cute little, no, those are the baby chimps. And chimps can be some of the most violent of primates because in the wild they kill each other. Okay? They fight. Diane Fossey did the gorillas in the mist. She, of course, was killed by poachers because she did stupid things. She attacked the poachers who had weapons. And so they killed her. I once went to a talk by Jane Goodall, who was the first of the female primatologists, the first primatologist. And the question came up from the audience, did you train Diane Fossey? And you could tell that Jane Goodall did not like Diane Fossey. She said, well, I would have if she'd have paid any attention. So I think that Diane Fossey rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, even Jane Goodall, okay? Now the third one, okay, Beruti Galgas. Gasdi. This is the third one. You're going to have to know her name because she is a member of the Trimates. She actually lived as a young girl, first of all in Germany. She was of Lithuanian descent. Her parents went to Germany. And then they lived in northern Quebec. And then they moved to Toronto. And then she went to school at UCLA and went to University of British Columbia for her graduate degree. And now she's teaching at Simon Fraser University in BC. I met her when I was doing archaeology. She was our faunal expert. She collected dead animal bones and, melted them down to their bones so we'd have collections of bones to identify if we got them out of the ground. I swear to God, I could have been in a room with her 40, 50 times. I don't even know if she ever said a word. She was as quiet, if not quieter, than a mouse. Her boyfriend was a biker. He was a lot of fun. She didn't say anything, and then 20 years later, I see her on a National Geographic special. And I swear to, if I hadn't known who it was, they identified her, I wouldn't have thought it was her. She was articulate. She was talking about saving the orangutans from deforestation and killing of parents and selling them as pets after the Clint Eastwood movie where he had an orangutan, right? And apparently the government went after her, and she's now teaching at this Simon Fraser University. Because of course the government, where she was, wanted them to cut down the forests. And she didn't want the forest cut down because that was the natural habitat of the orangutan. So she got into trouble with the government. She's teaching at UBC. So she did the orangutan. And the three of them together, which is always a good question on an exam, knowing the three of them, Galdikas, Fossey, and Goodall, and knowing that together they were called, and this is so cute, it's almost like a musical group. They were called not the primates, but the trimates. When I first heard it, I couldn't believe it. But anyways, this was a day when Leakey was hiring the only primatologists, and he had a thing for young women. Okay? In fact, his first wife was his grad student. He left his first wife he left for the grad student. She went on to discover more things in Africa than he ever did. And their son, okay, Richard Leakey is probably the most famous paleoanthropologist in Africa today, and he was a member of the Kenyan parliament. So they did okay vis-a-vis a kid, but they broke up and they divided up the sites that they made. I guess he was fascinated with female primatologists. I could never figure out when I was a student why the only primatologists were women. I got, well, what is this? Is this a recruiting thing? I don't know. And then I found out about that. And of course, nowadays it's more gender equal. There are men in the field also. Okay, but this explains this. So Galdikas was also sent out by National Geographic and Leakey. And she's at Simon Fraser University. And a big protector of the orangutans, and incredibly articulate. Go figure. Okay, now the next thing we should know about is the comparative method. In anthropology, we compare all cultures to find out why different parts of culture work in different societies than others. And from these comparative studies, we come to our scientific conclusions of what we're likely to find in agricultural societies or other types of societies. So holism, in the field, comparative method are all important in anthropology. Now, this is the one I always end up putting on an exam because I find I wouldn't even call it anthropology. There is a field, 120, okay, which is called humanistic anthropology. And it basically says you cannot be a social science if you talk about human behavior. There is nothing scientific you can say. Everybody does everything for their own reason. It's all individuals. There's no cultures, there's no society, there's no units that influence people. It's just individual. Okay? I would say it isn't anthropology, but we use the term humanistic anthropology. So, there's always a question on the exam, something like what type of anthropology does not use the comparative method or does not believe in the scientific method? And that answer is humanistic anthropology. Or, at the bottom, there's a similar point of view called postmodernism, which says the same thing. So we would accept either of these to describe a field of anthropology that does not allow anthropology to be a social science. Okay? Only wants to record people, data about people without looking at any generalizations, theories, or anything else about human behavior. Now we get to a question that will be on the exam. For sure. I don't know which one you're going to get. Cultural relativism and ethnocentrism. Did I put that down? Cultural relativism. And ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism Now, ethnocentric means that you judge other people's behavior and cultures by your own culture's values. So if you wore a certain headpiece because your religion told you that you had to wear that headpiece, and I was in the culture being ethnocentric, I would say things that were disparaging and critical of you wearing that. I would say, oh, what a silly headpiece to wear, because I did not share your religious beliefs. I had my own values of my own culture. Okay? That's what I would do. I don't look at other cultures to understand them. I look at other cultures and compare them to my own unfavorably. I judge other cultures my values. Oh, they don't like hockey. What kind of people are they? They play tennis. I don't know. That kind of thing. And so, ethnocentrism is obviously a very negative thing. It doesn't allow you to understand the behavior of other people and other cultures because you can't put yourself in their place to understand why they do things. And also it gets to be racist, quite honestly. Donald Trump does a very good job of ethnocentrism. We hope he's acting, but I don't know. He's certainly getting the votes, which shows you where America is. Okay? Cultural relativism is looking at all cultures from the point of view of their own values to see why they work the way they do. Okay? If somebody had a certain headdress that was religious in a certain culture, you would learn about it, why they wear that, what it means, what does it associate, what part of the whole culture is it about. Okay? You don't have to agree with it in the end. I mean, personally, I don't believe in female circumcision. You know, if we're not both having fun, screw it. You know? I mean, well, don't, okay? Yeah, what can I say? But in many cultures in the world, female circumcision is mandatory. Okay? So I understand why I learned as an anthropologist, understand why they use it. It supports male domination. It does all kinds of things. Okay? But I don't agree with that, but I at least looked at it in a cultural relativist point of view to understand it. Because if you're going to change things anywhere, you have to know why they exist. You don't go, oh, that's morally wrong. They don't have your morals, they have their own for whatever reason. Okay? And they're usually good reasons. We, in our own cultures, don't always do the things that other people do. Okay? Yes?
Do you think in countries that accept female circumcision, the women go along with it because that's what they believe also? Or do you think they go against it?
Who? Who goes goes against it?
The females that do get laid themselves.
I think that in many countries, the females have been indoctrinated to accept it. And in fact, they've shown that in many of the cultures, it's the older females that actually administer it.
Wow.
Yeah. But that shows you the power of culture. Cultural beliefs, okay? Now, so, you are going to have to understand these two things, and you're going to have to write something that shows you are either making a statement that is ethnocentric or a statement that is cultural relativist. And in the book it talks about the Inuit. And it just so happens that the Inuit are called the Eskimo by people further to the south. And we don't use this word anymore, except for the Eskimo, the Edmonton Eskimos, because it actually is a derogatory comment, a put down by people to the south of the Inuit. It means eaters of raw meat. And the people to the south described this to explorers, oh, they're eaters of raw meat. And it wasn't a nice, they were, putting them down. And so you will have to make a statement that is ethnocentric. Yeah, those people eat raw meat. The Inuit eat raw meat. Well, that's awful. Or you will have to make a statement that is culturally relativist. The Inuit eat raw meat, and it is a staple of their diet, which has no value in it whatsoever. Okay, no value, no condemnation, or, and actually, if you actually say, and that's good, that would be another value the other way. Yes?
So on our test, we're gonna make the.
You're not gonna know whether you're gonna get the ethnocentric or the cultural relativist.
But we make it up about the Inuit?
The Inuit, yeah. Okay, you have to identify what they're, why anybody would talk about what, it has something to do with their name, what they're called, the Eskimo, by other people, okay? And there it is there, give an ethnocentric statement about the Inuit. Provide 129 and 130, provide a statement about the Inuit that is an example of cultural relativism. Except you're going to have to do it about the name Eskimo. That's added from the class. Okay? Then we go down to Scott and Kuznar, 137, 138. They are the standard anthropologists. They believe that the scientific method can be and is used in anthropology. It is a social science, and I think most anthropologists believe it. I would say humanistic anthropologists are not anthropologists, but that's another story. Okay? So you should know that Scott and Kuznar advocate what most anthropologists advocate, that you can use the scientific method when talking about anthropology. Number 142, it's always on an exam, compare late list in Brazil and North America, because I have Brazilian friends, and God, they're never on time. I swear to God, I don't know how they got the Olympics and the World Cup in the same year, and if they'll ever get it on time. Yes?
Are the Eskimos and the Inuits the same?
The Eskimos are a name that were given to them initially by a group of neighbors to the south, and it was a derogatory remark about them eating raw meat, which actually, if you live in the cold, the way you get, and you have no vegetables, the way you get nutrients out of things is you eat them raw. They get more vitamins out of raw meat by eating them raw, okay? And so, they put them down by calling them Eskimo, which we do not call them anymore. We call them by their own name, the Inuit. So, you should know about Scott and Kuznar, there's an A, B, or C. You should know about number 142, compare lateness in Brazil and North America, just because I have Brazilian friends who are never on time. Now, Goldstein and polyandry. Polyandry is where One woman has several husbands. It is very rare. It's more likely that one man will have several wives in the world, but in one or two places in the world, it's the other way around. And Goldstein looks at this in the Himalayas, where it's quite common, and he looks at the 3 reasons given, and he picks the one that's likely to be right. So you should know what polyandry is. Several husbands, 1 or more husbands, sorry. No, 2 or more husbands, not 1. It's not 1 husband, polyandry. And you should know which one he sees is correct after doing his study. Okay? Because he gave 3 of them, I might put an A, B, or C, one that's wrong, and therefore it's not the right answer, and you should know what the correct one is. And that's likely to be on the exam because he does a very interesting study, Goldstein, in order to look at that. And that's a type of society you don't often see 1 woman, several husbands. Then there's postmodernism, which is the same as humanistic. And that's about it. Okay? So, I've given you a lot of possibilities for questions. I have tried to put you in a situation where you don't have to spell things. And before you go out the door, I want to give you one more question on the exam. Take one and pass them back. Don't cut yourself on the paper. Unfortunately, at my age, you don't believe it all. No blood there.